to Tina Olson from GKN Aerospace. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Catherine. We can go to the next slide, Becky, please. So hi, everyone. So I'm here today to give you an insight of what we are doing to deploy the AS13100 in GKN Aerospace. Next. But let's start with a short introduction of who I am. So my name is Tina Olson, and if you ask my daughter, I have a weird accent. The easy explanation is that I have a Finnish and Swedish background, been in US since 2007. 30 years ago, I fell in love. I fell in love with quality. And I have had different quality roles since then in automotive, the mining industry, the steel industry, and also now in the aerospace. My role today is within GKN Aerospace. I can continue with my passion for quality. And I'm leading the quality systems for the engine sites. I support all the engine sites and making sure that we have integrated to the global standards, and now then leading our way to the deployment of AS13100. And I must say that this assignment that we have now, I am even more in love with quality now, because this is the first time I see so much of human touch in a standard that I've ever seen before. Great progress when you look at the standards. Next, please. Just a couple of short slides about GKN Aerospace. So this is a global business, and the business is divided in 3 core markets: civil, engines, and defense. Next, please. And as you can see, we are spread across the world. We have 41 sites. There are manufacturing sites, repair stations or MROs. We have engineering offices. We have technical centers, you name it. And we are actually in 13 different countries, approximately 15,000 employees, and our sales are around £3 billion. As mentioned, I represent the business lines engines, but we are here to talk about AS13100. So let's get into it. Next, please. So when we knew about the standard coming pretty early, but until we saw this in front of us, we realized we need to take certain steps pretty quickly in order to be ready by the end of 2022. So no proper project management tool was introduced from the get-go. We just had to get started. So I will go through each and one of these steps, and some of them are already completed, some of them are in works, and some of them are in the plans. Next, please. The first step for me personally, I had to get involved in AESQ, especially the deployment strategy group of AS13100 that you can see on the left-hand side of this slide. The team or the group had already started when I joined, but that didn't matter. I was quickly introduced what was expected and how to work in this group. The objectives were already set, and it clearly states that we want to ensure homogeneous and practical deployment of the standard. And that is a very important word for me, practical. Let's not make a PowerPoint slide. This is practical deployment of the standard. Very important. We also share difficulties, challenges, and of course, best practices that has already been mentioned from the earlier speakers. I personally love the preparation milestone plan that you can see on the slide as well, created by ASQ. In GKN, we have used that as a baseline for our milestone plan. In this deployment strategy group, we have also a dashboard to make sure that we are all on the same path and helping each other to be on the same journey and share our experience. Next, please. So, as mentioned earlier, we have several sites across the business lines, civil, engines, and defense. So we needed to understand what businesses, what sites will be affected by AS 13100. That was not all 41 sites. One of the challenges from the get-go was the absence of one common QMS for all sites. We have different QMSs. They have their own certificates, AS 9100 certificate. Another challenge was that all the sites, QMSs, they have different level of maturity and complexity. The reason for mentioning that, what does it mean if they have different maturity and complexity, is when we are trying to find the commonalities to close any identified gaps with one way of doing it, one solution. We identified 11 sites that will be affected, and this was done by communication and discussions with our program and commercial functions. From these 11 sites, we then ended up with 8 assessments. And the reason for that is because some of the sites do have a multi-site search. So 8 assessments was required to have their assessments done. Next, please. Before we even started with the assignment to do the assessment, we had to make sure everyone had access to the standard itself. It seems pretty obvious, but with several QMSs, with several maturity, we were not sure how they handle the subscription of standards. This is now solved, and we all have access to the standard through a subscription. The next step then was, of course, to make sure that we invite all the affected sites done remotely. And we went through the standard together. Some of the sites already knew a lot about the standard. They were part of the forum that took place in April. So they had a lot of knowledge already. But it was more of a session to understand what is actually required, what is expected from us, how can we work together and answer any open questions we might have had. We created a placeholder for all the information we would like to share with each other. And we had a SharePoint site where we can go in and check others' work, gap assessment, etc. We also have all the important links to the ASQ webpage. Next, please. Also in the prep phase, it's important to communicate to the rest of the organization and to all the leadership teams, to the program organization, of course. And I have had the opportunity and occasions to present in the engine leadership team several times about the standard itself. What is expected? We need your support. We need the commitment from you. The communication within the organization is vital. We have to have the awareness. We have to have the knowledge in order to have the support and commitment on this journey and be successful by the end of 2022. Next, please. So when the preparation was completed, we submitted the compliance assessment file together with the reference manual. There is nothing else the sites needed. this is all they need to start their assessment. I could see some attempts to create their own assessment tools, but that was absolutely unnecessary. You have it all there. Just send it out. We also gave the sites a deadline, making sure that, hey, if we are going to be successful, we have to put some deadlines, milestones. Have your assessments done by this date. For the sites in GKN, we had mid-August. We could see that some of the assessment came back pretty early. Some of them struggled a bit, yes, but then we actually asked the ones who were done, hey, go and help the other sites and show and share your experience. Very successful, and it was so much easier, and in that way we could also spread the information and awareness even more about the standard. The results you see in the middle of it, so it's 8 sites and they look different. The reason for they looking different is what I mentioned before. We have different levels of maturity, complexity, and the size of the sites as well, and the scope of the QMS, of course. Some of the lessons learned that I would like to share with you, that spread the awareness of the standard as much as possible, makes it easier when you do the assessment. Don't put the assessment to a quality functions only. We didn't do that. We made sure use cross-functional teams. The standard is not about a quality manager's tasks only. And don't overcomplicate the assessment. As I mentioned, there were some attempts trying to figure out how can we make a smart assessment tool. No need. Use the tools given by AESQ, the file, and the reference manual, and focus on the supplemental requirements. They're easy to find because they are in the tool itself, and they are also very clearly identified in the standard. There are approximately 110 supplemental requirements, if I counted them right. If I'm wrong, please let me know. Another lessons learned, help each other. Please, one is finished, go and help the other. And if you have global functions, which we have in GKN, we made sure to incorporate them into the assessments as well. You may have engineering or procurement. Make sure they are part of the assessment. And last but not least, document objective evidence where you already assessed yourself as green. That was our recommendation in GKN. Why? Because when you go back and reassess or revisit your assessment, you will understand, why did I put the green there? Oh, this is what I meant. Please, objective evidence, and it's easy to follow up on. Next, please. So when all the assessments, 8 of them, were completed, plans to close the identified gaps were created. With what, how, by whom, and when. So we received 8 plans, but our ambition is to create one common compliance plan for GKN Aerospace. Next, please. So as we speak, the assessments and the plans are being reviewed in order to identify commonalities. Why inventing the wheel several times? If we can share best practices and also agree on one solution, how to close a gap. The approach now is to have one plan, and we will formalize this into a proper project management tool in order to measure progress of it. The common gaps will then be assigned to work groups or task groups to work on this common solution for all of us. And then we execute the plans together. Next, please. This is an example from one of the sites in Engines. They have already now prepared their current QMS by adding on the AS 13100 into the platform or software they are using for their QMS. They pointed out where the supplemental requirements will belong, and also appointed process owners for each and one of them. So their framework is already created. Next, please. So one very important part of a successful deployment is the knowledge of what is actually required. Without knowing that, we don't know where to go. So best way of that is, of course, to be trained. We noticed early on the different levels of training depending on your role in the organization. So make sure that some of the training is recommended, some is required depending on your role in the organization. For us, for example, when there are words like quality leader, who is a quality leader? We have different definitions of roles in our organization. We are quality system managers, there are QA auditors, there are configuration quality managers, etc., etc. Are they all quality leaders? So make sure to identify who goes through what kind of training. Next, please. This is the biggest challenge as we have experienced in GKN, and that is the flow down to our suppliers. There is a table in the standard that is very clear when it comes to applicability, so we know who will be affected of what clauses in the standard. We already took the poll earlier today, but we need to make sure that we can categorize those suppliers we have today and make sure who will be affected by what. We share some of the suppliers today with different sites in GKN. So here we need to understand what kind of tools or mechanisms are the different sites in GKN using to flow down their requirements. As mentioned, we have different QMSs at this point. We have different way of flowing down. We have different maturity. So we have to come to one way of doing this. And we need to make sure that we start communicating with our suppliers. And we already know that ASQ has done a great job with the communication to the entire supply chain. But now it's time for us to take over and take that to our suppliers, start collaborating with them, and then, of course, measure the progress together. How far are we into the deployment of the standard? Next, please. So within GKN, we have started to measure our own progress. On a monthly basis, we sit with the leadership team, and they have been asking us to have some kind of progress report. So this is the progress report you see on the slide, where we'll actually make sure that we follow each and one of the tasks. The first two are already completed. That is the compliance assessment and then the compliance plan for each site. Then we will then follow how well we are progressing when it comes to the different chapters of the standard, A, B, and C. Then we have added on a couple of tasks that we need to monitor a little bit closely, and that is the training. Do we make sure that all necessary training has been provided to the organization and the different roles that we have identified? Another task that we need to monitor closely is the flow down to our suppliers. How have we done that? How well are we on that road? And then, of course, the pre-audit. As you know, that in next year, we will have to make sure that we can audit all the sites when they start getting closer to the end of the implementation of AS 13100. Next, please. And last but not least, we have to have a roadmap, making sure we don't fall off the wagon here. We know that the target is 31st of December 2022, and we have already started the journey. As you know, we are already in October, and this is the month where we are supposed to have the one plan together from the 8 assessments. And that's my presentation. Thank you.